Okay, so another week, another chapter. Looking at administrative law this week, the practical significance of administrative law. This is created by administrative agencies, okay, not by the legislative, okay. EPA created the specific pollution control requirements that came from the Clear Air Act. All right, so the Clear Air Act was created by Congress, but the EPA established a specific control requirements for that particular statute. All right, so agency creation and powers, right? Enabling legislation specifies the name, purpose, functions, and powers of the agency being created. This is done by Congress. All right, so you have Congress, and they're making an administrative agency. All right, so you have the SEC, the FAA, the IRS. All right, types of agencies. Executive agencies include the cabinet departments of the executive branch, occupational safety and health administration. Those are within the cabinet of the executive branch for the president. But you also have independent regulatory agencies or outside the major executive departments. This is the FTC and the SEC. All right. You have the bureaucracy. You've heard about the bureaucracy when you watch the news. These are administrative agencies, sometimes referred to as the fourth branch of government. It's very interesting, okay? Certainly, Congress does not have time to make every single law out there, so they delegate the power down to these administrative agencies. Okay, so how does this work? The Administrative Procedure Act. All federal agencies must follow specific procedural requirements in their rulemaking, adjudication, and other functions. They have certain things they have to do, all right? The definition is the arbitrary and capricious test. Definition is vague, but includes certain factors here in the book. All right, look at this. The definition of what makes a rule arbitrary and capricious is a vague one, but it includes factors such as whether the agency has done any of the following. Okay, so we're looking at the administrative agencies and trying to determine whether or not they've done something. 1. Failed to provide a rational explanation for its decision. Okay. Changed its prior policy without justification. Considered legally inappropriate factors. Entirely failed to consider a relevant factor. And rendered a decision plainly contrary to the evidence. All right. So if it passed that test, then it's good. If not, it doesn't. Okay. Procedures for making rules. Well, rulemaking is the formulation of new regulations. All right, there's generally 3 steps: notice, commitment, and the final rule. All right, so notice of the proposed rulemaking. It's published, all right, in the proposed rulemaking proceedings in the Federal Register. All right, so they're saying, hey, this is an administrative agency, and we're going to make this new rule. Well, it's going to be published. Well, while it's published, it's sitting there in the Federal Registry. We have what we call a commitment period, and this is the time in which people can read it. So once notice is given in the Federal Register, the agency must allow ample time for persons to comment in writing on the proposed rule. So you and I, we could read this and say, hey, this is our comment. Once that is completed, the final rule is then drafted. After listening to the comments, the agency drafts the final rule and publishes it in the Federal Register. Real easy. Alright? But the question is, how many people really comment on these things? I mean, I don't. You probably don't. But certainly, big business does. Lobbyists, they'll comment. Informal agency actions. Alright? This is another way to make rules. Declare the agency's interpretation of its enabling statute's meaning, and they impose no direct and legally binding obligations on registered parties. Alright? This does not establish legal rights, so it's exempt from the APA, which we were just talking about. They're not making a new rule, they're just interpreting the already existing statute. Right? So it's an informal action. It's not a rulemaking procedure, they're just saying this is what we think. So they don't have to go through the whole formal process.